You have always imagined yourself as the one who bends rather than breaks, who absorbs the storm instead of summoning lightning. You have lived by sensing every ripple in the emotional air around you, adjusting, softening, enduring. That identity is woven into you so deeply that to imagine otherwise can feel like betrayal. Yet life does not always allow us to stay in our chosen posture. There are moments when the old identity fractures, and something in you long suppressed begins to answer back. Picture this. The dove dons the feathers of the hawk. This is not merely role play or a sudden mood swing. It is a crossing of an archetypal threshold, a shift where the empath, pressed to the very corner of their psychic labyrinth, dares to use the weapons of their opposite. The narcissist and the empath are not just two personalities. They are constellations, reflections of psychic energy locked in distorted symmetry. When the empath mirrors the narcissist's tactics, the encounter is not with one person, but with the shadow itself. This is why the act feels unsettling and yet strangely natural. For years, perhaps decades, you have nurtured compassion, patience, transparency, but the unconscious does not only care for your chosen qualities, it seeks wholeness, and wholeness requires balance. If you have been healer, somewhere inside you lives the opposite, the warrior, the one capable of striking. In denying this opposite too long, you have fed it in secret. When the corner arrives, when the pressure becomes unbearable, it bursts through. Imagine the shock of hearing your own voice sharpen with words you never believed you could speak. A calm silence that is no longer surrender, but strategic withholding. A correction of reality not to deceive, but to prevent being deceived. These are tactics the narcissist has long claimed, but they are not their invention. They are archetypal survival functions, long buried in your own shadow. The psyche experiences this reversal as both terror and liberation. On one hand, you feel alien in your own body, as though wearing a coat that smells of smoke and carries another's shape. On the other hand, you feel the surge of long-denied agency, the ability to resist without collapsing. The mask unsettles you, yet also strengthens you. It is crucial to name what is happening. You are not becoming a narcissist. You are crossing into your own shadow territory, discovering parts of yourself you once exiled. Jung would call this individuation, an alchemical confrontation where the repressed opposite rises into view. You did not choose cruelty, you chose survival, and in doing so, the mirror of the trickster flickered awake. The danger, of course, is forgetting that this mask is temporary. The dove must remember its wings even while trying on the feathers of the hawk. If worn too long, the borrowed identity shapes you, stiffens you, and erodes the softness that once gave you life. The task is not to banish these new weapons, nor to cling to them, but to hold them consciously, to wield without being possessed. So the first fracture of identity is both a wound and a threshold. The empath begins to realize they are not bound to one posture, one identity, one eternal script. They can survive, resist, and still remain themselves. And in that realization lies the opening of the entire journey. Take a breath here. If you are watching, let me invite you. Pause and tell us in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is there. This channel grows not by algorithms alone, but by the circle of people who share in the same questions. If you find resonance in this story, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so each new step of the journey reaches you in real time. Now let us step deeper. You have touched the first crack in the mask. But what stirs awake when the empath mirrors the narcissist? It is not merely tactics. It is the trickster, ancient and mercurial, the archetype that slips between roles and never sleeps once awakened. And it is there, in the trickster's gaze, that the true cost begins to unfold. When the empath mirrors the narcissist, something stirs that is older than both personalities. It is the trickster, an archetype that slips through cracks, bends rules, and delights in reversals. Once summoned, it does not easily return to sleep. What began as a desperate survival tactic quickly reveals itself as a deeper initiation. For to act against one's nature is to awaken the shadow that was always there, waiting. The first sensation is shock. You hear your own voice echo with a tone unfamiliar, calculated, edged, deliberate. For years, compassion and honesty defined you, but now a different register cuts through, one that startles even you. The trickster whispers that this new voice is not foreign, but hidden. It insists that you are not only gentle, not only soft, but capable of precision, deception, and even power. At first, this feels intoxicating. You have long been disoriented by the narcissist's maneuvers, their sudden silences, their reframing of reality. Now, for the first time, you return the gesture. You withhold, and they fumble. You mirror their tone, and they falter. The asymmetry that fed their power collapses. For a moment, it feels like justice, like long-delayed equilibrium. But the trickster never comes without a price. Every tactic borrowed is carried not just in the mind, but in the body. When you use cold withdrawal, a part of your own heart freezes. When you weaponize silence, you must strangle your natural impulse to reach out. When you bend reality, you risk bending your own perception. This is the shadow's bargain. To wield these tools, you must let them leave their imprint inside you. Here lies the danger. The trickster makes it seem easy, even clever. You may begin to relish the sharpness of your new edge, to lean on it, to test how far you can bend another's world to your will. And with each use, the mask grows more familiar. What was meant as temporary becomes tempting as permanent. Yet this temptation is itself a lesson. Jung would say that the unconscious does not judge these tactics as good or evil. It only cares whether you integrate them consciously. The trickster asks, will you wear the mask until it fuses with your skin, or will you take it off once the danger has passed? To forget to remove it is to lose yourself, to be possessed by shadow instead of allied with it. Dreams often reveal this dilemma. A woman once dreamed she wore her partner's heavy coat, thick with smoke, and spoke in his voice. In the dream, she felt powerful but woke unsettled, even sick. The coat was not just warmth, it was transference, a reminder that what you wear long enough reshapes you. So too with tactics. They can shield, but they also sculpt, and the longer they are worn, the harder it becomes to remember your true form. The trickster thrives on paradox. It gives you strength by forcing you to step into the very terrain that once disoriented you. It reveals your fierceness by coaxing you to play roles you once despised. And yet, if you mistake its gifts for your essence, you drift in a sea without compass, where deception becomes as natural as breath. Still, the trickster is not the enemy. Its presence signals growth. It says, you are not only prey, you can be predator too. But the deeper message is subtler. You are neither. You are more than both. The trickster, if held with awareness, becomes a teacher of flexibility, a guide into paradox, a reminder that identity is not fixed. As you stand in this new terrain, the exhilaration mixes with unease. Power feels good, but it also weighs heavily. You begin to see that justice achieved through borrowed cruelty risks cutting you as well. And so the true question emerges. Not, can you use these tactics? But how long can you carry them without losing your own reflection? The empath's journey now shifts from the thrill of retaliation to the sobering inventory of cost. For if every borrowed weapon alters you, then the act of mirroring the narcissist is not simply a confrontation with them. It is a confrontation with yourself. Pause here and let yourself consider. Have you ever felt that flicker of satisfaction when you met manipulation with your own sharp response? Did it feel liberating, frightening, or both? If you are watching, share in the comments. Your reflection may mirror another's experience. And don't forget, if this exploration resonates, subscribing ensures you travel with us as each chapter unfolds. The trickster has awakened. Its laughter echoes in your psyche. Now the task is to face the cost, to count the toll that every mirrored move demands. And that, my friend, is where our path turns next. The night after the trickster first whispered through your words, you dream of corridors lined with mirrors. Each reflection shows not your own face, but another's, familiar, unsettling, distorted. In one, your eyes are sharper than they should be. In another, your mouth forms commands you never thought you would give. This is the psyche's symbolic theater, a warning that by wearing another's mask, you risk slipping into a hall of illusions where your own name grows faint. Dreams are not idle stories. They are the soul's commentary, a symbolic map of inner terrain. To find yourself in a fortress, to wander marble halls heavy with incense, is to step into the narcissist's domain. It is their psychic architecture. Walls built of control, mirrors polished with manipulation. By entering, you glimpse how power feels from the inside, and that knowledge is both illuminating and perilous. For once you have breathed that air, you cannot deny its allure. At first, the armor feels protective. The silence you wield shields you from constant intrusion. The cold withdrawal once used against you now glances off attackers like steel. Even the bending of truth, once a prison, becomes in your hands a tool, blunting the impact of lies aimed your way. For a while, this armor seems to fit, offering invincibility where once you felt exposed, but armor carries its own trap. What shields you also numbs you. To keep your heart frozen, you must keep part of yourself at a distance. To keep silence as weapon, you must muffle your own instinct to reach. The fortress you enter does not only keep others out, it keeps you in. The longer you wear its walls, the less you remember the open fields where trust once grew. This is the paradox. What begins as salvation can calcify into prison. You thought you had discovered strength, but strength laced with rigidity can become isolation. If every tactic is borrowed from survival, then survival alone cannot sustain the fullness of a soul. A life lived entirely in armor is no life at all. Jung reminds us that the unconscious does not moralize. It does not say silence is bad or reframing is evil. It says only, these are tools, and tools can cut both ways. If you use them unconsciously, you are possessed. If you use them with awareness, you may survive the labyrinth without forgetting the forest beyond. The key is to know when to set them down. This recognition often comes in quiet moments after battle. The adrenaline fades, and you notice a subtle weariness, a readiness to defend even when no threat is present. The trickster has left its residue, a ghostly echo of siege. You realize you cannot carry this posture forever without becoming the very thing you once resisted. Dreams shift accordingly. Where before you were trapped in mirrors, now you may see masks, Some fit too well, fusing with your skin. Others you claw away in panic. These images are not punishment. They are instruction. They ask, will you remember the face beneath? Will you reclaim the name you nearly forgot? And so the empath, now armored, must confront the cost of safety bought at the expense of connection. This is not about discarding the new strength. It is about refusing to mistake it for your only shape. The armor is not your identity. It is a temporary tool meant to be used sparingly and laid down when peace returns. If you have ever felt the relief of retreating behind emotional walls, only to find those same walls blocking love, you already know this paradox. Share in the comments if such a moment has surfaced in your own story, for it is in the shared recognition of these traps that we find common ground. And if you wish to keep exploring, subscribe and keep the circle unbroken. The fortress has shown you its power. The mirrors have revealed their trick. Now the question becomes, if you can shed the armor without losing the strength it gave you, what form emerges next? The answer, my friend, is the rise of the sacred warrior. The moment arrives when you realize that armor, though heavy, is not meant to be your permanent skin. You peel it back, and what rises is not the dove of old, but something fiercer, tempered by fire, a sacred warrior. This figure is not the narcissist's mirror image, nor the old empath resigned to absorption. It is the union of strength and sensitivity, of steel and openness, born precisely from walking through the labyrinth of shadow. The sacred warrior does not confuse cruelty with boundaries. Boundaries are not walls of ice, but lines of sacred geometry, clear, deliberate, radiant with intention. To stand in them is not to dominate, but to protect. They are defenses that allow life to flow, not barriers that choke it. When you wield the tyrant's sword, it is only for the moment of defense, and afterward you return it to the earth. The wisdom lies not in striking, but in knowing when to sheath the blade. This is where power becomes paradox. You can now say no without guilt, refuse intrusion without collapsing, guard your inner garden without turning to stone. You no longer mistake gentleness for weakness or boundaries for selfishness. The sacred warrior holds both the healer's open hand and the defender's sharp edge, and by balancing them, you no longer live as prey to the narcissist's siege. Myth has always spoken of this transformation. Think of the meek confronting the tyrant with the tyrant's own sword. The story does not glorify violence. It warns of the danger of clinging to borrowed weapons. Yet it also celebrates the one who dared to pick them up long enough to prove that the old imbalance was never absolute. This is the archetypal rhythm: confrontation, balance, and release. You may notice the energy in your body shift. Where once you collapsed under sharp words, now your spine holds steady. Where once silence felt like suffocation, now it becomes choice, wielded consciously. This steadiness is not hardness. It is groundedness, an awareness of your own center. You are no longer swayed by every gust of manipulation, no longer pierced by every barb of criticism. You stand not as oppressor, but as one who knows their own worth. Yet even here, the trickster lingers. It tests you, whispering, "Why not keep using this power? Why not bend others the way you were bent?" This temptation must be faced with clarity. The narcissist lives in perpetual siege, anticipating attacks that may never come. If you remain in warrior stance too long, you risk inheriting their paranoia, forgetting the fields of love beyond the fortress. The sacred warrior is not a permanent posture. It is a response, a role to be inhabited when needed and then set aside. To dwell in it always would be to live in combat mode, armored even in moments that call for tenderness. The true art is discernment, knowing when to defend and when to open, when to strike and when to stand down. This discernment marks the passage from survival into sovereignty. The empath who once endured everything without protest now holds the tools of refusal and defense. But unlike the narcissist, who is trapped in armor, you carry both sword and chalice, both shield and heart. You embody integration rather than possession. As you live this balance, compassion deepens. You begin to see the narcissist differently, not as a towering oppressor, but as a soul caged by their own armor. You know the cost because you wore that armor yourself, even if only for a time. You understand its suffocation, its rigidity, its way of keeping out love as well as harm. And this understanding plants the seed of a new compassion, one that does not excuse but sees clearly. If you are listening, consider this. Have you ever felt yourself rise into fierce clarity, defending a boundary you once thought impossible to defend? Did it surprise you how natural it felt, and yet how exhausting if sustained too long? Share in the comments. The story of your boundary may be the mirror someone else needs. And subscribe if you wish to keep journeying deeper into the archetypes that shape our hidden lives. The sacred warrior has risen, the sword has been lifted and returned. Boundaries stand luminous, not brittle. Yet there is still another turn of the alchemical spiral, the transformation of passivity into sovereignty, the discovery of compassion not as naivety, but as wisdom. That is where we now move, toward the alchemy of power itself. Alchemy begins in the crucible, where heat transforms what once seemed fixed. For the empath, that crucible is the confrontation with tactics borrowed from the narcissist. The lead of passivity, the years of enduring without answer, is placed into fire. Out of that fire, something unexpected emerges. Sovereignty, a gold that is not domination but self-possession. You feel it first in the subtle shift of energy. Where once your solar plexus tightened in fear, now it glows with steadiness. Where once you collapsed into silence when words cut too sharply, now your silence is deliberate, chosen. The difference is everything. What was once weakness becomes conscious refusal. What was once endless yielding becomes sacred boundary. This is not aggression. This is alchemy. And with this shift comes a surprising compassion. Not the naive compassion that excuses cruelty, but the sober compassion of one who has worn the armor and felt its weight. You recognize that the narcissist's fortress, for all its grandeur, is a prison. Their armor keeps danger out, yes, but it also keeps love out. Having briefly carried that armor yourself, you know how suffocating it is, how lonely its corridors feel. This knowledge tempers your anger and prevents you from carrying the battle forever. Here, myth again lends its wisdom. Think of Persephone, who ate the seeds of the underworld. She did not return unchanged. So too, once you taste the tactics of control, you cannot forget their flavor. But instead of binding you eternally, this memory teaches you how to navigate both realms, the dark fortress and the open garden. You become a traveler between worlds, not a captive of either. This dual vision unsettles those who meet you. People who cling tightly to one identity, always yielding, always armored, find you difficult to predict. You can shift between openness and steel, compassion and firmness. One moment you disarm with transparency. The next you refuse entry with a gaze steady as stone. This fluidity is rare, and it unsettles those still trapped in extremes. Yet the temptation lingers. Once you realize how easily tactics can bend situations, you may feel the urge to test them, to lean into the power of manipulation. This is the shadows test. Have you integrated or merely switched masks? The narcissist uses their tactics unconsciously, as default. The integrated empath uses them consciously, sparingly, in service of wholeness. The difference lies not in the act, but in the awareness behind it. The alchemy is not complete without this discernment. Gold must be purified, sifted from the dross of shadow possession. And so you learn to hold both impulses, the desire to protect and the temptation to control, in the same vessel. This containment, this balance, is what transforms borrowed weapons into instruments of sovereignty. Compassion now flows in a new form. You can look at the narcissist not as eternal enemy, but as mirror. You see their tactics not as monstrous, but as desperate strategies born from wounding. This does not excuse harm, but it reframes the dynamic. Instead of living as prey to their control, you now stand as equal, capable of seeing both their wound and your own strength. The true revolution, then, is not outer victory, but inner integration. You no longer need to prove yourself by defeating them. You no longer need to collapse to preserve peace. You have found a third path: to stand in your own ground, to know that passivity has been transmuted into power, and that compassion has ripened into wisdom. This is the alchemy of power. It is the moment the empath realizes they are neither dove nor hawk, neither prey nor predator. They are both, and more. And from this paradox comes sovereignty, the authority to live without needing to control, without needing to submit. If you are listening, take a moment. Has there been a time you glimpsed someone's cruelty not only as malice but as the echo of their pain? Did that recognition change how you carried yourself? Share in the comments, for your story may be another's key. And if you have not yet subscribed, do so now, so these journeys into psyche and myth remain part of your path. The alchemy is not the end, it is the threshold. Beyond it lies the rarest gift, the ability to shift forms, to carry both shadow and light, to be shapeshifter and sovereign at once. That is where our journey now turns. The final transformation comes not in battle, but in stillness. Having walked through the labyrinth, tried on the armor, faced the trickster, and discovered the sacred warrior, you now enter the rarest terrain of all: quiet sovereignty. Here the empath is no longer chained to a single role. You can be healer and warrior, giver and defender, open-hearted and impenetrable. You are not possessed by any archetype. You are the one who chooses which mask to wear and when. This is shapeshifter mastery. Not the deceptive changeling of fairy tales, but the sacred shapeshifter of myth. The one who can move between forms precisely because they are anchored in the formless. In dreams, this often appears as shifting into animals. A hawk when clarity is needed. A wolf when boundaries are tested. A deer when gentleness is called for. Each image reflects the expanded range you now carry. Others sense this change even if they cannot name it. Some are drawn closer, attracted to the calm authority you radiate. Others pull away, unsettled by the fact that you no longer fit a predictable script. The narcissist, especially, feels destabilized. Their game relies on asymmetry, your openness against their control. But when you mirror them with awareness, then lay down the mask without being trapped, they realize the old script is broken. You are uncatchable, not because you run, but because you no longer inhabit the field where the hunt takes place. Quiet sovereignty is not about domination. It is not about proving strength. It is about knowing that you can wield power without clinging to it, defend yourself without freezing your heart, open yourself without inviting invasion. It is the rare balance of opposites held together without splitting. This balance is what Jung called individuation, the ongoing dance of shadow and light within a single soul. But this mastery carries its own caution. Having discovered the potency of tactics, you will sometimes feel tempted to use them more often than needed. The shadow tests you. Have you truly integrated me? Or do you now wear me as your new identity? Each time you resist the urge to manipulate for its own sake, each time you set down the weapon once the moment has passed, you prove the integration is real. The greatest danger is forgetting. Forgetting what you have become. Forgetting that the weapons were never the point. The world will try to lure you back into old roles. The endlessly giving empath. The forever defending warrior. Resist that simplicity. The self thrives in paradox, not in reduction, and so you carry forward with a strange serenity. You can walk into the court of manipulation without being bound by its laws. You can return to the open fields without longing for the armor you once wore. You can hold every archetype within without being consumed by any one of them. This is freedom, not the brittle freedom of never being hurt, but the deeper freedom of knowing that even if you are, you will not lose yourself. If you are listening now, pause and recognize this truth. The tactics you once feared, despised, or envied were never foreign weapons. They were tools always hidden in your own psyche, waiting for you to wield them consciously. What once felt like chains in another's hands are now instruments of sovereignty in your own. And this is the hidden grace of the journey. Not that you conquered the narcissist, but that you reclaimed the part of yourself that once cowered before them. You have become whole, and wholeness is its own revolution. If this resonates, tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? And how has this story touched your own? Subscribe and keep walking with us. For each step into the unconscious opens new doors to symbols, myths, and truths waiting to be lived. You have walked through fire and returned carrying water. You have been prey and predator, mask and face, shadow and light. Now you stand as something beyond all those names. Sovereign, shapeshifter, whole. There is a silence that follows initiation. Not the silence of suppression, but of arrival. An interior stillness that says the journey has carried you to a threshold you cannot retreat from. You have worn the mask, felt its weight, and learned to set it down. You have been the empath dissolving into others' storms, the warrior standing guard with sword in hand, and the shapeshifter who moves between forms with deliberate grace. Now you emerge into a wider landscape, the realm of sovereignty. This sovereignty does not announce itself with banners or trumpets. It reveals itself in the subtle ways you carry yourself. When a sharp remark cuts the air, you no longer crumble nor retaliate. You simply meet it with a gaze that does not waver. When silence once suffocated you, now it can be chosen, a tool rather than a cage. When manipulation seeks to twist reality, you know the terrain well enough to refuse entry. And in each of these moments, you remember. The power lies not in the tactic itself, but in the awareness with which it is held. The paradox is complete. You can be soft without being weak, strong without being cruel, discerning without being cynical. You can carry anger without losing compassion, wield boundaries without forfeiting tenderness. This is the alchemy Jung spoke of, the integration of opposites into a living wholeness. No archetype rules you now. Instead, They gather in council within your psyche. The healer, the warrior, the trickster, the guardian. Each has a voice. None commands you absolutely. Others will sense the difference. Some will be drawn near, comforted by the quiet authority you exude. Others may recoil, uneasy in the presence of one who cannot be easily controlled. And those who once thrived on asymmetry, the narcissists, the manipulators, will falter. For the old script no longer applies. The prey is no longer prey, and the predator no longer holds the field. You have stepped outside the game, and in that step, you have claimed freedom. But the most important shift is inward. You now know that the part of you once silenced, diminished, or hidden has been reclaimed. The empath has not died. The narcissist within has not conquered. Both have found their place in the larger design of your soul. You no longer need to fight against yourself, no longer need to choose between compassion and strength. You have become the paradox itself, and paradox, as Jung would remind us, is the very fabric of wholeness. So walk gently with this power. Do not rush to prove it, nor to wield it carelessly. Let it season your words, steady your presence, and deepen your gaze. When you meet the eyes of another, friend, stranger, or adversary, let them see not the empath alone, nor the shadow alone, but the whole being who has returned from the labyrinth carrying both light and dark without fear of either. This is mastery, not the brittle mastery of control, but the enduring mastery of self. You are now sovereign. You are now free.